The Rock and Roll and Coffee Show is brought to you by Retroactive, located at Broadway at the Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, taking you back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. ShopRetroactive.com. Pick up your bottle of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show Hot Rockin' Hot Sauce now at Retroactive or rnrcoffeeshow.com.
It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. Yeah, we do.
Let's get right into what you're doing now, Dave. I think the latest thing that you have going on is the Kings of Thrash Lockdown single is out, correct?
Yeah. We just
tell me about
Friday.
that.
Sure. We've wanted to get some material out, some original material here in 2025 because we've got some tour dates coming up here in September and October. And so actually Chaz brought the song over. And I gave him some instructions. I said, dude, 1984, full-blown thrash metal. I said, just head for like Nuclear Assault, Game Over, Metallica, Ride the Lightning. Just go right to the heart, the heart of the matter. And because he's got a real thrash heart, and plus he's our singer, so we decided because we've written quite a bit of material together, and we wanted something that really had, just kind of came out of the gate swinging. And I find it's always better to write around the singer. And let him kind of lead the charge. So I thought he brought a cool tune, man, and we collaborated on it, and got into shape. I think it's a time when he was writing it. I mean, this started back even in January, February, when we were initially working on it. I don't think we saw probably how poignant the lyric is, in light of all of the unrest going on now, but. So yeah, as a good thrash song should be, maybe a bit political, a bit anarchist, and always good fun.
Yeah. Now you did a video with it as well. You do quite a bit of videos with the Dice stuff, and
yeah,
you're always doing a video. Do you find that still important these days?
I think it is. I mean, especially with this one, so Cleopatra gave us a deal to put just a single out, which was very cool. They did the Best of the West double live DVD package that we put out, back in it was from the show we did in 2023 at the Whiskey A Go-Go there. And that was only our fourth show, and we filmed stuff down in Australia. A couple of times now. We've got stuff from our first trip down there. We got some other stuff that we filmed when we took Chris Poland down there. We did the P-Cells set together with him down there. So we always archive stuff. We've got a lot of stuff in the vault. As far as a music video goes, I think it still is important. I think at least to have a visual. There's kind of three videos. There's the performance video like we did. There's four, I guess. There's a live video. Then there's like these visualizer videos, which are kind of like, almost a video, but not quite a lyric video. And then probably the simplest one is the lyric video, where you play the song, have the lyrics on the screen. So, but I think for this, it was good time to come out of the gate swinging. The band, I think, kicks ass. Everybody looks cool. We got a good unified sound and a look to what we do, and to have Chris Poland be able to be a part of it with us, and just it's all that we do. Just rashes.
Right. So Chris is in the video. Is he going to be appearing at some of these shows with you?
He'll do the Whiskey A Go-Go with us. That's kind of our home turf. It's our hometown gig, if you will. We kind of, I guess, technically the band's kind of based in Los Angeles. Chaz and Fred live there. Jeff's there a lot. I'm there a lot. I don't live there, but so and plus that was the Megadeth hometown back in the day when we started. I mean, really, when you think about it, LA is Thrash's hometown. I mean, even Metallica's from LA. Megadeth's from LA. Slayer, Dark Angel. Agent Steel, Abattoir, it really is the hometown of thrash. Now, Metallica relocated to San Francisco to get Cliff Burton in the band. Exodus, of course, is from up there. So, I mean, they're an anchor, obviously, of the Bay Area. Anthrax, anchor, and Overkill, for sure, an anchor of the East Coast, the New York scene. So we all had our, kind of the four corners of, or at least three corners of the USA. I think, Tampa probably got a little bit more death metal with Cannibal Corpse and Death and, that kind of stuff. But I'd say LA, San Francisco, New York, New Jersey, New York/New Jersey, those are kind of the trifecta for thrash metal. So so that's is that for us. Now, Chris and I just put out an announcement today to do Basstory, which is a brand that I created back in the 2015, I think, is when I kind of first did it. But we sort of downbeated it, I think, in 2018. It's a combination of kind of a bass clinic storyteller performance thing is what it was. Now, I haven't done one since 2019. I did like a whole world tour of that. While, we were working on a Megadeth record that year. Dave had his throat cancer stuff. So I went around Europe. I went to South America. I did a bunch of stuff in America. So
the Basstory, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about that. So you said it's like a clinic and a storytelling thing. So is there a full band there, or is it just you and guitar player?
There is. I mean, I'm going to modify. So this one is August 7th in the New Haven, Connecticut area. Because Chris and I are then going to be performing. So Chris Poland is is a special guest on it. He won't be part of all of it, but it's me. And my backing band is Christian Lawrence and Dave Sharp, who are in a band called Dead by Wednesday from that area. And I put out a record for them on Combat Records some years back. They were my backing band on other Basstory events. So we've, I've included them in to sort of be my backing band over the years. So, I figure I'm coming down from Toronto. In Toronto, August 1st, Dieth has a show. We're playing a festival up there, right? So I'll stay in the East Coast, kind of just drop down, do Basstory, go over to the Terrificon Comic-Con where me and Chris Poland are going to perform. So, that's kind of how I route these. One gig happens and I say yes to all of it. I go, sure, Toronto, why not? It sounds good. Dieth's never played Toronto. Let's play Toronto. Let's play Canada, and, Canada's been asking for all of my bands, from Kings of Thrash and Dieth and all this stuff. So I thought, man, when the phone rings, you go. And, it's funny how I tend to be, pretty resourceful on these things, So to me, I get my team around it, and we're kind of like, well, what else can we do? All right, let's do a Basstory. Hey, let's do this convention and, all this kind of stuff. Now, ironically, a couple weeks later, and we haven't really fully announced this yet, but it's out there, is, we're going to revive Montrose. We're going to call it Montrose Live. So that's me, Jimmy DeGrasso, Keith St. John, and John Levin from Dokken. We are the band for that. And Keith has kept that going since Ronnie passed at NAMM every year. He does the Montrose Remembered, Ronnie Montrose Remembered. And that's kind of more of a recollection of everything Ronnie did, from his acoustics, from the very first stuff with Sammy Hagar and that, to the Gamma, his acoustic stuff, everything. This thing that we're doing is strictly like the first album and some Paper Money stuff, just the totally fucking kick-ass rocker stuff that, guys like us like, so.
Yeah. So are you touring with that?
Yeah. We're going to, I mean, it's a fly date kind of tour. You know what I mean? It's not, whereas, Kings of Thrash, we're going to get on a bus in October and, do Florida, Ohio Valley, East Coast, that kind of stuff. Montrose will be like weekend fly day kind of stuff,
gotcha.
which is perfect for that, So
yeah. Which ones do you prefer? Do you prefer the flights or the bus?
Yes and no. Here's the thing. When you fly, like, so to do a show on Friday, you usually have to leave Thursday, right? So you play Friday, you play Saturday, you fly on Sunday, right? So it's 4 days of your life to do two shows, right? And we all know the hour 30 you're on stage that's the whole reason we get out of bed in the morning, right? That's everything. but the flying and traveling, that's always the biggest pain in the ass of all of it. Um, so, yet at the same time, you get on a bus, you kind of know what your life is going to look like for the next few weeks, right? Because, you just, so you get into that groove, you get in the yellow submarine, as I call it, and you go, that's your life now. You're sleeping on a bus, your toothbrush is in a different zip code every day. And, you wake up in a new town and there's something fun about that, really invigorating, and, I kind of look at it like, we're hunters, man,
Yeah.
there's hunters and there's gatherers, for those of us who hunt, that's what we do. We go out and we hunt,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Well, you got to be really focused individual to be able to do all the stuff that you do. Because I can't even get into all the stuff that you do. We don't have that much time to do that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, how do you keep it all organized and just focus on this and then
this head's got a lot of gears in it. I mean, look, I sit in this office here, which has kind of become my podcast studio, because this is also where I talk to you, of course, and then I do the David Ellefson Show. That kind of fell in my lap with my partner Josh Toomey. We're sitting here bullshitting like this on his podcast, and after it was done, he goes, "Dude, you should do a podcast. You got a lot of great stories." I'm like, we'll see, and then a week later, he's like, "All right, let's go." I'm like, all right, so, but it turned out to be a lot of fun. And I think probably one of the perks that's coming from it that I didn't see coming is, we get to be now an official news source, when we talk to our friends, because, we're not a shit talking podcast. You know what I mean? That's not it's like this, we're friends, man. And I talk to my musician friends, and we're on the same team. You know what I mean? That's the thing is I'm not like sort of a journalist over here looking to stir the pot to get the clickbait. I could give a shit about anything. I don't care if 4 people watch my podcast. I really don't. It's just, for me, it's about, friends talking to friends. And if you've got a new record, just like you're doing, if you got a new record, you got a show, you got something else coming out, hey, let's talk, and we'll throw it up and bring goodwill, so for me, it's kind of like, come on the show and let's have a chat, so for me, that's I think that's fun. Musicians talking to musicians, it's a different dynamic. Josh plays bass in Primer 55. He's been a career bass player himself, so we kind of have this, we call it the David Ellefson Bass Coalition, so we're talking to people, you know what I mean? It's always, it's musicians talking to musicians. And I think there's a different sort of candid, relaxed thing that happens with that. And it's because I want people to feel like they're safe, that they're there to have a good conversation,
And that's important, I think, with a podcast.
It is, because,
about being safe.
Yeah, because I mean, look, you have a podcast, right? So we're, when you talk, are you just looking to get, okay, where's the juicy nugget that I can put out there that get the clickbait? And like, I know that's the world we live in, that's what it is now. But, I think for me, kind of like everything I do is it's, I didn't get into music or any of this. Like, it's got into be a rock star because it looked kind of fun when I was a kid, and I got my Kiss Destroyer record. It seemed kind of like a fun thing to do, right? So here I am still doing it. But it's I'm always about build your brother up, build your brothers and sisters up, you know what I mean? And all boats rise. When one rises, let's all rise together. And I just think that, that's how I grew up, that was kind of a Midwest value. So this whole thing where we tear each other down and I got to step on you to make me bigger. It's like, dude, I hate that. I don't want to be in that room at all,
Right. So your Kings of Thrash tour, you start in September, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And that's the 30th anniversary of Euthanasia.
Yeah, we're kind of eking it in. We when we started, we did a tour of the UK and Europe back in October, November of last year. And November 1st is the drop date, November 1st, 1994, so 30 years ago. So we're kind of in that 30th year. So we were able to pick a few songs off of that record for that tour, and we figured let's carry it forward, because our set list is huge. I mean, super wide. Imagine. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, we got 30, 40 some songs in there, because between doing Killing, So Far So Good So What, Peace Sells, we're bringing a couple things off Rest in Peace and Countdown, and euthanasia. Plus now we've got, a couple of our own tunes that we put in the set, and we're writing some more stuff. So I think that was the thing with Kings is, look, it started out as sort of a, let's go honor thrash metal. We pulled in a little bit of Thin Lizzy and, some Riot and some stuff that we grew up on as well. So, and then I think the next logical step to kind of legitimize yourself is to write your own tunes,
Sure.
and
Sure.
even though some of the Megadeth stuff is stuff that I wrote, and so they already are my songs, but, and Jeff and Chris were part of them, of course. So, I mean, they already, that set list is our music, but I think to move forward, it's always good to sort of freshen it up a little bit and show everybody what you got. I mean, we had another song called Bridges Burned that we rolled out in 2023 when we did our first tour, and we literally wrote it on the road. Jeff and I had pretty much demoed it up in the studio the year before, so we kind of musically it was pretty much together. But we collaborated on it as a group at Soundcheck, tightened it up. Me and Chaz and Jeff sat down and wrote the lyrics in a hotel room while we were on the tour. And then we said, take it to the stage. And our crew were like, dude, you guys can't play that on stage. I said, oh, really? Watch this, like, why not? It's like, and that's, who knows if we'll ever even officially record that, but it sits out on the internet now. It's on YouTube. And, so you ask about videos. All right. So we have one live video of a new song, and now we've got a studio version, because it's like, why not, man? It's thrash metal, dude. It's like, this is the kick-ass, have fun, get in the pit and frickin' punch your neighbor music. You know what I mean?
I thought it was love someone. Get in the pit, love someone. Isn't that what
that's if you
said?
That's if you do hip hop. if you do thrash metal, it's like elbow someone in the face.
Kid Rock told me that.
Kid Rock. Yeah, I love Kid Rock too. He's cool too. But yeah, this is more about like, thump your neighbor.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you think that you guys will release a full album at any point?
It's possible. I'm certainly not going to say no to it. I tell you what, it was great to just do one song. Making a record is a lot of work, especially when you live in different cities and you're trying to collaborate. And, one of the things about Kings is we are not four of the same guy. We are four very different individuals, and so to sort of be agreeable on something, it's I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a challenge, and quite honestly, it's the diversity that makes Kings so cool, and I guess I come from that even with Megadeth, and like Chris Poland, Jeff Young, they were the sort of the diverse guitar players to Dave, you know what I mean? So I grew up in an environment that kind of expected that. So to have Kings mirror that, I think is cool. I'm already used to that dynamic, and having everybody not just agree on everything, but everybody bring a bit of a different perspective it's cool. I mean, that's ultimately what a group is about.
I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, look, every group needs a leader. I mean, to some degree, I lead, a lot of it. I put Jeff over there to sort of put set lists together and do that. Like with this song Lockdown, I tasked Chaz with that, and said, hey, go do that. I mean, Fred does he's our liaison with the record label. He does all of our creative, all of our artwork and everything. So I mean, everybody's
didn't he?
Yeah. He shot the video. He produced it and directed it and everything. So we got four really creative guys that do very different things. So it's like we've got four guys that really contribute something. So and that's great, man, to have four awesome. Different dudes. Yeah, we're like a little music factory. Yeah, It's really cool.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you're all in different areas. So recording, do you like recording remote like that, or do you prefer the studio?
Recording now, just because everybody lives all over the world, we've all kind of learned to do it remotely. I have stuff here to write, sort of demo things, but when I record, I usually go down to my friend John Aquilino from that band Icon, who are on Capitol Records back in the 80s. He's got this killer studio, an SSL room plus a Focusrite room. So I go down there because me and John are friends. Excuse me. And I don't mind being produced. I like musical companionship, if I'm playing something and I'll say, hey, what do you think about that part? And he'll usually be like, don't play so much, just simplify that a little bit. Like, like just play bass, you know what I mean? And sometimes it's a reminder, that everything doesn't have to be holy wars, and yet at the same time, because he's a great guitar player, we can musically work up parts and stuff like that. So, and he's got a great ear, great engineer. So I like having that, where I go in and I feel like I'm not just sitting here by myself trying to do everything. And I did that when we did the Ellefson No Cover record. Everybody was at their own home because it was COVID. So we were all at home. So I sat here painstakingly for, days and weeks recording songs, learning. And those were all cover songs. So at least the parts were already written by someone else. I just had to learn them and record them. But
yeah,
I like, honestly, I hate being all down into the gear when I'm trying to create. If I'm trying to create, I'd rather, you punch, hit record, let me play. Let me do one thing really well.
yeah.
So, and then as far as, sometimes we can be in the same room. Like when we did Lockdown, Chaz came out here. He came out here for a couple of days, even though he brought the song in, he and I worked on it, got the arrangement pretty together. I said, just get out here for a couple of days and hang. We'll go down to John's. And because I said, I find with something like this, and we had already had this experience with Kings of Thrash writing together. When we're in the room, there's a different musical conversation that starts to happen. And like that whole ending riff, that da 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 da. I wrote that. I just picked his guitar up because we had a different version of it that I had written. And I said, here, give me your guitar real quick. And I was working on something. And all of a sudden I stumbled onto that riff and he goes, dude, that's rad. Let's do that. So I just, recorded it real quick and then he learned it and played it for real. And, and Chaz is a fantastic guitar player. He plays the first solo. He's got that real, guttural kind of playing. He's a great player. And even with the vocals, man, it's like, I wanted him to just fucking, go for it, and not, this is not time for auto tune and all that pop crap. You know what I mean? This is time, it's like, listen, if you listen to like Dave on Love to Death or even Hetfield on Ride the Lightning or, Creeping Death or something, or, again, Nuclear Assault, it's like, it's untamed and off the hook, and that's what it should be. There's, you can hear the rasp, you can hear the voice straining to hit the pitch, you know what I mean? Because it's about the attitude. It's about getting the attitude out. So Chaz is great at that stuff, So I just wanted to, it was great to just have him okay, step over the mic, like bark this out, let's go, and really knock it out.
I think I've done some recording remotely as well. I've done some stuff with a friend of yours, Jason McMaster.
Sure. Yeah.
So he sang on a couple of my songs, and Jason's so great. He just sang to what I gave him. But right. I think the benefit of being in a room for me is you can work with the singer or the drummer, and maybe change parts. Whereas remotely, here's what you got, unless you're going to wait to say, back and forth forever.
Well, that's how I started working with Jeff Scott Soto. I had a song, and I couldn't, I brought it in for me and Frank Bello, and Frank's like, killer song, but you're going to sing it. And I wasn't the right for it, like I can sing it live, no problem, but to record it, for some reason, my voice wasn't, I wrote the whole song, so you'd think it would, but it wasn't for a final production. I wasn't the right voice, So John, I was down at John's studio, and he goes, dude, just call Jeff, and Andy Martingelli, we were working on some stuff, and he's like, dude, just call Jeff Scott Soto. He's your buddy. You love his voice. Like, just call him. And so I did. I said, hey, Jeff, can I flip you a couple of bucks? Cause he's a professional and I didn't want to take advantage of his, of his good, voice. So I just said, let me flip you a couple of bucks if you can put put a track down. Literally, like 30 minutes later, he had it back done with harmonies. I'm like, wow, okay, this is freaking great, And I said, hey, I want to rewrite one little word and change one little thing because it would change it from you to me, kind of a tense, of the vocal. But and then once we did that, I was like, oh my God, okay, this is now the door's open, and that's what started Ellefson Soto. I sent over, I said, hey, let's do me and Andy Martingelli already had most of better part of a record pretty much written musically. And so we just started sending them to Jeff. And about 3-4 songs in, he goes, hey, you know what, guys? He goes, this is really cool. And I don't want to just be like sort of the session singer where you guys just pay me to sing on it. He goes, I'd rather be a part of this, And I said, great. I said, so would we, so we didn't have a record deal or anything. So, he got on board like how bands start. You're kind of all for one for all, and we finished up a record literally in a month. And that was during COVID. That was 2021. So, and then one of the songs was Swords and Tequila by Riot. And I hit my friend Rick Hughes from the band Sword up in Canada for him to do a duet on it. And we pushed that out kind of off the Ellefson No cover. It's like, all right, let's just put another cover out. And it was sort of a way to sort of tip our hand that, hey, we got something else coming here, but we'll just kind of test the waters a little bit with it. And people got super excited about it. And I called Joe at Rat Pack Records, and he signed us to a deal, and we put the record out, in what was it, 2023 or something. Yeah.
Are you still doing stuff, you and Jeff?
Yeah, we actually have an album coming out here shortly. It's, I appreciate with Joe at Rat Pack, because I know when I had my label, ordering vinyl can be, you order, it's not a guaranteed timeline because these vinyl factories they were started to get so backed up with orders. They couldn't give you a delivery date. Right. So you're like, is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 6 months? So, we would do a pre-order, and then we would, when the stuff came in, we would ship it out. But Joe's like, look, I like to do packages. I like to put in patches and trading cards and all kinds of cool stuff, So he goes, I don't want to promise a delivery date until I get everything here in the warehouse. And then I'll say, okay, it's for sale. And then he can start shipping it. So I appreciate that about it. Cause you know how frustrating it is, when you get one part of a gift or an outfit or something, and it's like, when's the rest of that come? You almost forget. It's like,
you do.
So I like, because Joe thinks, in my case, we're a, hard rock metal thing. He thinks like a hard rock metal fan. Okay. If I'm a fan, I want to buy the whole package, So, and then obviously we didn't know some of the stuff comes from Canada. So we didn't know where that was going to land. I guess it's all okay now, but, we haven't put a hard release date out, but, I'm hoping it'll be here this summer.
Okay. Talk a little bit about, let's get into your bass technique a little bit, because a lot of the stuff you play is fast, right? And you're playing with a pick. So that right hand technique, I mean, a lot of bass players struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'm one of them. Try and play your bass line sometimes is like, Jesus, all the various rhythms and going so fast.
The thing of it is to me, it's kind of like a striking the string, and because of with the Megadeth stuff, I'd always kind of palm mute, sort of got, so that way I could sort of, play it, and this isn't plugged in, but to be able to, kind of play the riff. There's some stuff I'm learning right now for the summer that probably should be played with fingers, because that's the way the original artist played it. But for me, I just like the tone of a pick is just so good. You know what I mean? And especially live, when I go in the studio, even if I'm playing a ballad, which I did this symphony and metal thing for my friend Marina V that Bruce Kulick was on, that we put out a couple months back, and it was her song. But even that, it seemed like I played it with a pick just because the tone is so much better. It's like with a pick, everything it's clear.
I agree. I'm a strictly pick guy.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with fingers. And I admire the guys who can really shred and play with it. Frank Bello, I sit with him and he's just going for it. And obviously Steve Harris is amazing, so there's Getty, there's guys that have made that's their sound. That's their voice, but for me, I just like the plectrum. I think you get the best of all worlds. You get the low end, you get the attack, and it allows me to play fast, and to be able to, to shred and, really play the guitar parts when necessary. If, because a lot of metal stuff ends up, you end up kind of having to jump in on some of the guitar riffs and stuff,
Yeah.
So, so whatever makes it sound the best, but I usually end up using the plectrum, most of the time.
When you started out, were you fingers?
I was, just because I think that's what the picture in the Mel Bay Volume 1 electric bass book. You had a guy with a Fender P bass, plucking, and I'd see people on TV. I mean, I was 10, 11 years old, right? And I'm learning this, but so I learned like that, and doing different things. There's making sure, like, if you are playing with fingers, making sure that they're even, and then playing, and then doing the same.
Yeah.
Making sure, and then you're cross stringing, so your cross string stuff is good. There's certain lines that, are easier to play with fingers. And then there's other lines that are, that are easier to play with a plectrum for the cross string stuff. Right. So, it's I find that, if a guitar player wrote a part, for instance, usually playing that with a pick is going to be easier, because it's how it was composed, right?
Yeah.
Even though it may be a little harder to jump the strings because of the spacing of a bass versus a guitar, but I find it's generally the method of playing it is going to be easier. Sometimes with the fingers, like Sabbath. Okay. So Geezer and Tony are often not doing the same thing. They will for a while, they'll play a same, Paranoid. Right. They'll do the same things, obviously, with riffs. But then there's times when, Geezer goes off and he's just ad-libbing. He's kind of playing like a blues bass where, he's playing these different patterns that he does. So I find if I'm learning other people's songs, like for an all-star jam, or, you're going on tour and you're, like I did, let's say with Overkill or something, I always try to get inside the one or two little hooks of that player. Right. Because, even with Megadeth music, for the most part, it's like, right. It's kind of like these 16 note interrupted by triplets. Right. And so when you kind of go, okay, that's the general motif of what this band does, it's easier to kind of grasp the bigger picture of it. Right. Like when I was growing up learning Geddy Lee, I didn't realize that they were all just, these simple pentatonic. They're kind of, they're not that hard when I go, oh my God, they're just simple, kind of blues, in the box pentatonic stuff. Now he's a very, melodic, complex player in his lines. His lines are incredible, but to go, okay, he's basically an in the box pentatonic guy. Okay. Now I can kind of go there with it and figure his lines out, Same with John Paul Jones, was a lot of the kind of the same thing, these simple in the box, in the box, meaning that, in one spot on the neck is where most of the notes are, they're not having to move all over. It's kind of right here. A guy who I just absolutely admire is Bob Daisley, who wrote and played bass on probably, I think, everything up through Bark at the Moon, and then came back and did a bunch of other stuff. I mean, his lines are just incredible. He played with Uriah Heep on a Bob Minogue. He played with Rainbow on Long Live Rock and Roll. So, I mean, not only is he a great writer, but I don't know. I'm like, as soon as I heard that, I'm like, who thinks of that? That is just such a, it's just such an incredibly, usually when a bass player comes in, it's like, right? But then I'm like, oh my, like, I was just like, he had me at fucking the first bar when the bass line came in. And I've just been such a fan of his. ever since. And I've gotten to know him now going to Australia. I got to have a nice phone call with him, and I
Pick his brain a little bit.
Yeah, I do. I pick his brain. And he goes, hey, anytime, call me anytime or email me
That's
anytime,
awesome.
mate. Yeah. So it's, I always want to pick his brain on bass parts, really.
Yeah.
But he's just such a clever player, man. He's kind of my go to, just thoroughly amazed. You know what I mean? His lyric writing is great. His bass playing is great. When Max Norman engineered the first Ozzy album and Diary of a Madman, and he said, he goes, I think on that first Ozzy album, he goes, I think Bob may have punched a total of 2 or 3 notes total of like take a take all the way through, however many songs are on that album, like maybe 2 or 3 notes, not even like fixed parts, but just like, oh yeah, hey, I cuffed it was a B rather than a C. You know what I mean? Just like, and you're like going, man, I mean, super, super great. I mean, talk about to be able to write a part, learn it and commit to it and put it down, man. That's masterful.
Well,
I love that.
Speaking of bass parts, and I mean, you have, I don't know if you wrote it, but you have one of the most iconic bass lines ever in rock with Peace Sells.
Mm-hmm.
Did you write that, or who wrote that?
Dave came up with it.
Okay.
He had a bass. It was my bass. We were living up at Carrot Fay's house, who was the engineer of the Killing Is My Business record. And it was fretless. I had ripped the frets out of it. It was a BC Rich Eagle. And he was playing, and he said, hey, Junior, come here. And we're getting ready to go to rehearsal. And he said, here, play this part. So I, learned the part and play it. And then we get out the door and go to rehearsal, and then that night we put the song together in the studio, and he'd already had the lyric. Remember we were driving up to pick Gar up for rehearsal a week earlier or something, and he just looks over and goes, hey, what do you think of Peace Sells, but who's buying? And I was like, cool. I mean, just kind of random out of context,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So but he was pretty good like that. I drove, and he was kind of the wingman, co-pilot, and because I learned my way how to drive around LA in my van, but yeah, with that line, and then that line, I mean, I think it was basically a guitar part, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But the guitar parts would come over to bass parts. Sometimes things written on bass would go to guitar, and then they'd go back and forth. So I mean, the way that the line ended up, look, initially it was like I just was playing it in the room, and then we, that was the intro, and so, and the other thing about that song too is I remember as we had the lyrics and we were putting it together, I remember going up to the mic to sing the harmony, which to me is the Michael Anthony Van Halen thing, Peace sells, but who's buying? Peace sells, but who's buying? Add that minor third up above, which is, that was to me, I grew up on Van Halen. I grew up, a lot of the stuff I grew up on in the 70s and early 80s had, even a lot of the Dio stuff with Sabbath, always had that harmony up there. And so I'd always be the guy singing most of that stuff, even as a kid growing up in my bands in the Midwest, so,
right.
yeah. So
I mean, that's such a, did you, I mean, when did you realize that how iconic that bass line became? Do you remember the moment?
I mean, I didn't honestly, because, the truth of it is, we were on the tour during that whole time. Right. So people, I remember Chris Poland, we had a band apartment, we called it the Ranch. It was over in Silver Lake, and me and Dave lived there full time. Chris was kind of in and out between there and his girlfriend's house. And we had MTV on. So this would have been late 86, early 87, maybe the year that the album came out. And, they had one of those MTV, you heard it here. And I remember Chris, where he was in the kitchen washing dishes or something. He goes, hey, wait, was that our song? And then the next time it came up, MTV or MTV News, they did the little DJ scratch. So it was like, must not have been, so you just kind of forget about it. And then we would randomly hear it, but, we were on tour that whole time, and so as people would say, oh my God, it was on every day. I heard it for 10 years. They played it all the time. It's like, I guess, know what I mean? We were on the road, we were on tour all the time and making records and doing stuff. So, You know, I mean, for me, I guess I kind of missed, you know, how big it was. Even like Sweating Bullets video, you know, we were on tour, you know, and our manager's like, dude, this thing is huge. I mean, like, we are really getting great daytime rotation with this song. And, you know, we're on the road, we're on tour, and,
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't see it on the road really, unless you're in a
no,
hotel watching
yeah,
MTV
you
or
know, you're
something.
rolling down the road, and satellite probably wasn't as good on the buses back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
sometimes a lot of our own success, we probably didn't see directly. We saw it obviously at the shows, you know, because the arenas are full and people are buying our records, but you don't really see kind of the little pieces, the little crumbs in the trail, you know, that leads to
Yeah.
that sometimes.
That's such a fun bass line. It's so simple, but it's a little tricky with that pinky ring finger pinky
Well,
push
that
there.
is it, and that's the thing is it. That's why I created that Kelly Bird bass, because that
Can't really hear it, but yeah, I can see what you're doing.
it's that little
Yeah,
right.
yeah. That's tricky. It's hard.
It is tricky, and I find with the Kelly, because I recorded it on a Mockingbird bass with BC Rich, so it sat out here a little farther, right, which makes your hand be flatter. So it was easier to, you know, hit that little load, as opposed to kind of a, you know, a traditional Fender bass like this, where it sits back here. It's harder, your body, it's harder to play the part, you know. So I always found that, you know, that when I made the Kelly Bird, if I used that for an encore, the part played itself a lot easier, you know, because it's kind of a crowning moment, you know, in the show. So it's like it's best if I play it well, you know.
That's cool. More stuff you got going on is your coffee. You still have your coffee going, right?
I do. Yeah. We had a good year at NAMM this year. We had a nice booth, bunch of friends there who had booths next to us with Riot Stitch clothing and things like that. And we rolled out. We had some combat coffee. We did like a light roast, a smooth brew, kind of like our version of a yacht rock coffee, you know. And then we actually rolled out we call it unleaded, our very first decaf. It's I kind of was anti decaf, because I figured, you know,
Yeah, I'm not a decaf guy.
every great speed metal band should be funneled, you know, fueled by a good, you know, caffeinated blend. But the truth of it is a lot of people, I found, started requesting that. Jack Blades, in particular, from Night Ranger, I made him a half calf, like a roast in peace, half calf, half decaf, right? And then I went down to see him a few months ago, and he said, he goes, oh man, I'm not doing. I brought him some coffee. I was like, hey dude, I made you some half calf. And he goes, oh man, you got any decaf? I'm like, dude, you're killing me here. So, but he's such a cool guy and a good friend. He just said, he goes, yeah, I'm not drinking caffeine anymore. I'm like, ah, shit. So, but that honestly, he's the one who kind of got on my mind. I was thinking, you know, there's a bunch of people that just aren't really doing caffeine anymore, you know,
Yeah,
they're drinking
I
tea
guess
or
so.
whatever. Yeah. So I guess maybe kind of a certain healthy lifestyle. So I was like, all right, screw it. We'll do a decaf. And I tell you what, people love it, man. I mean, it was kind of the hit of the NAMM show for us, you know, with the decaf.
Why did you get into coffee? Like I have my own coffee. I don't know if you can see it back there, but oh, you can't see it.
Yeah. I kind of see it. Yeah.
I don't know. Microphone's in the way.
There you go. Yes. There you
go. Why did you get into coffee? I got into it because the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. I thought it'd be fun to have my own coffee.
For sure.
So,
right.
How about you?
You know, for me was, you know, honestly, I've been drinking the stuff probably since I was, you know, P-Cells era. Actually, you know, even before that, when I moved to LA, honestly, I smoked a lot of pot and I needed something to kind of wake me up, if the truth be told. And Dijon Carruthers, our first drummer, you know, he didn't do any drugs. He'd stopped taking all of his drugs. So we'd always go to his apartment in Hollywood, and he would, you know, he was into like chock full of nuts or whatever, but he was into coffee. We'd sit around and listen to like Les Binks on Stained Class and Cozy Powell on these Rainbow records and stuff, right? So we'd sit there and nerd out, and, you know, we'd listen to drum stuff and Ian Pace and drinking coffee and getting all nervous, you know, and I think it just kind of stayed with me, you know, a lot of late nights. So I was just, and then you get in the studio, you're kind of always just drinking coffee because it was just sort of something to do while you're in there, you know? So, you know, and then I quit all the drugs and booze and all that shit years back. So then for me, coffee just kind of stayed with me. I like the flavor of it. I like just difference. And as I traveled the world, coffee, I wasn't drinking anymore. So I wasn't sampling scotch and beer and all this kind of stuff. So for me, coffee was kind of like, well, what's the local brew here? What's the local flavor? So, for the most part, outside of America, except for maybe Japan, it's not drip coffee. It's espressos and, that it's more that kind of stuff. So even when I did the Bass Warrior tour that I just did in Europe, I got a dark like espresso roast, and I made sure it was whole bean, because most people, I think, at home will have a grinder. They'll put it into more of an espresso shot type of coffee rather than how we would here in America, like with a Mr. Coffee, filter type of coffee.
Is there a place that you like the coffee the best?
Look, Italy's phenomenal.
Italy.
I mean, I get it, because with Andy Martingelli and my Italian band, with Bass Warrior, these guys are coffee. Everything's, for them, a pizza is a sandwich, basically, right? Oh, let's have a pizza. Let's have a pizza. It's easy, right? And then there's always like, oh, let's get a coffee. Let's get a coffee. So it's always, but it's a shot, and I came to learn that, when you just have a shot, it's some ways it's healthier, because you don't get like sort of the acid reflux from drinking a bunch of liquid, right? It's just a quick, this quick snort like that. And you're like, all right, let's go to rehearse. Let's go to the stage, So I get why they like it. And they've got that one there. I should know the name of it. It's basically a Frappuccino, right? And it's, and the way they make it in Italy is just phenomenal. In fact, when you fly into the Rome airport, there's a coffee bar right there as you come out of luggage. I always make a right turn, go there, and I get one of those because they have the machine and everything there. And it's so good, man. It's like, it's literally like a Frappuccino, like the original, but like nice and creamy and with coffee in it. And there's the other one that they do too, where they take, is it the espresso dolce or something, where they, you take like a scoop of gelato and it's in the bowl, and then you pour the espresso over top of it, and it sort of just melts together. And you can eat it with a spoon, and eventually you just drink the rest of it. It's just leave it to the Italians,
Right.
Be creative.
All right, man. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We could sit here for hours and talk. I mean, we could talk bass, we could talk music, all kinds of things. But I know you're a busy guy.
I got stuff going on. So it's great to chat with you, Joe. Thanks for having me on, man.
I appreciate it. People can find out more. Your website is daveellefson.com, right? They get all your stuff from there.
Do everything from there. Yep.
Awesome, cool. Buddy. All right, man. Well, listen, you take care. Have fun.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Bye.